Viktor from Arcane is ready to dominate the Rift. Welcome to this Season 13 Ultimate Viktor Guide. It has everything you need, tips, tricks, combos and mechanics to achieve your goal this season with Viktor, whether you're a newer player aiming to get out of Iron 4 or grinding to get Diamond for the first time. After testing items and rooms from the best pro and solo queue players, I put as much info in this guide to help you emulate their builds and gameplay. I'm Zoose. Let's get straight into this guide and I'll show you how to dominate with Viktor, the Cyborg Machinist. Let's go over his abilities real quick, then I'll show you some tips and tricks you can use right away. His passive, Glorious Evolution, will upgrade each of his 3 basic abilities once he has reached 100 Hex Fragments. You obtain Hex Fragments by killing minions, monsters, and champion takedowns. His ultimate will automatically be upgraded once you have upgraded your 3 basic abilities, which is hitting 300 Hex Fragments. I will cover what each upgrade does after each specific ability. You want to make sure you pick up important Hex Fragments from cannons during laning phase, not only for the gold, but the important 5 Hex Fragments they offer. Viktor is rewarded in early skirmishes as you can pick up a huge 25 Hex Fragments even from a simple assist. Any 2v2 fights with your jungler can help you quickly reach your first main power spike, which is your first upgrade. His Q, Siphon Power, is a click target ability that damages enemies and shields himself. Viktor's next auto attack is now empowered and will deal extra damage. This is great for trades during laning phase for both damaging the laner and tanking some damage. Because the first Q and the auto attack are point click abilities, it becomes a great reliable damage during fights. Try to time your shield when there's undodgeable damage coming your way, or if you need to absorb from minions so you can freeze a wave next to your tower. The low mana cost makes it great to last hit minions when you need to. Using the initial Q on a spell shielded enemy will still give you a shield and empower your next attack. For example, Sivir's shield. The empowered auto attack is a non-projectile, so it can go through Yasuo's wind wall. The empowered auto attack cannot be used on turrets or inhibs. His upgraded Q, Turbocharge, gives Viktor some bonus movement speed and increases his shield strength. The burst of movement speed makes it a great kiting tool, helping you chase, escape, and position during important fights. Now his W, Gravity Field. Viktor places a round field on the floor which slows enemies that pass through it. Enemies will gain a stack every half of a second they're in the field. If enemies remain within the field for 3 stacks, so 1.5 seconds, they will now be knocked down and stunned for 1.5 seconds. This is a great zoning tool, keeping enemies away anytime you sense they are going into trade. This is your only real setup tool for a gank early game. Use it to slow or even stun enemies so your jungler can follow up with their abilities. Or if they have a guaranteed stun, use this afterwards. However, since it has a 1.5 second delay before the stun, most enemies will flash out of safety. Use it in areas that have tight corridors, like in the jungle and the monster pits in the river, so enemies cannot path around it. This will be crucial to getting away and escaping, so make sure you use it in front of enemies, otherwise enemies will simply walk over it. Use it to zone them out of objectives like Baron and Dragon. When enemies try to gank or dive you, use the slow and stun to force them to take more tower shots. It's a great offensive tool too, especially against immobile champs who can't dash or blink out of its area. It will set you up to hit 2 of your main skill shots coming up. Even if you won't stun the enemy, the slow is still very effective at chasing or escaping. You can use it over walls. It does not provide vision in brushes or fog of war, even if you slow and stun the enemy. However, it will be invisible if you place it in a brush and enemies are outside the brush. This means you can slow and stun enemies on the outside area of the field even though they can't see it. Therefore, we want to use this on the edge of brushes around the map, even the dot brushes, to slow and stun targets by surprise. His upgraded W, Magnetize, slows enemies anytime you land Q or E. This will help Viktor kite even better throughout the game. Now it's time for his most important ability, E, his Death Ray. Viktor shoots out a laser in a line, damaging all enemies it passes through. He will gain vision of the area around it. This is a very unique skill shot mechanic requiring you to add 2 inputs. The first is where you want the E to start, while the second input needs you to tell the laser which way to go. At first it will feel very awkward and clunky, so take your time learning this ability until it feels smooth. Try using 2 enemies in practice though, aiming to hit both with a single E. Another reason this feels so unique is that Viktor is able to freely move while using this. So even if you're chasing down an enemy or trying to escape, you can use this without slowing down. E is your main wave clear tool, especially after you purchase Lost Chapter. Try to hit as many minions as possible with a single E. This ability is your long range poke tool in lane and generally throughout the game when you need to siege or poke before a fight. Practice trying to hit enemies with the end tip of E. The AoE damage makes it crucial in teamfights to aim for as many enemies when they're bunched up. Hitting 3 to 4 enemies with a single E can turn many fights in your favor. The vision it provides makes it an amazing safety tool to check for areas like brushes and fog of war around objective focused areas. It has a surprisingly long distance for the vision it reveals. Use it to steal camps and objectives, as you can use it over the walls. Try to snipe low HP targets further away. Even if you are low HP in a fight, you can usually get a few E's from long range without the need to get close, so you can still be very useful. His upgraded E Aftershock basically deals another line of damage after 1 second using the same laser path. The flat damage is less, but has a higher AP scaling, making it stronger for late game. This upgrade is Viktor's first power spike. Hitting enemies with both the initial and second laser will take a huge chunk out of enemies. Your wave clear is enhanced, and you can usually kill the backline of minions with a single E, and finish off the front line with a few auto attacks. Use your W to make E easier to land, especially if enemies are stunned, as they cannot escape from the second lines of E. And finally, his ultimate, Chaos Storm, sends out an electrical field. It deals an initial burst damage and disrupts enemies' channeled abilities. The field will then remain for 6.5 seconds and deal damage every 1 second. It will follow the closest enemy champion hit and increases in speed the closer it is to Viktor. However, you can recast R as many times as you like and make it move in whatever direction you want. So just for clarity, if you want it to follow a single champion, just press it once so it will automatically target and follow that champion. But if, for example, the champion moves out of range and you want to hit another champion, just mouse over and click R on the other champion. The disruption is great to cancel enemy abilities, like Katarina's ultimate for example, so time it carefully against specific champions. Basically, it works similar to a silence ability, but only on the initial cast. Since it deals AoE damage, use it when enemies are bunched up. Hitting 3 or more enemies will easily put you ahead in a teamfight. Even if you die, the electrical field will remain for the full duration. Anytime you are guaranteed to die, but you want to go down fighting, use this and let it automatically target the enemy. It travels through terrain, making it great to fight champions who dash or flash over walls. It actually follows champions even if they go out of sight, so you can essentially reveal their position without having vision. When he upgrades R, it will do automatically, which is once you've finished upgrading your 3 basic abilities. The electric field now moves faster, making it harder for enemies to escape and easier to redirect to another target. Ability and upgrade order. First we'll cover ability order. You want to max E first as it's your main wave clear and poke tool. Leveling it will reduce the cooldown but increase the mana, which won't be an issue once you have Lost Chapter. You'll want to max Q second for the damage. Leveling Q will increase the damage and decrease the cooldown, however your shield strength won't increase, as it scales with your actual level, up to 18. Finally, max W last, as it's used purely for utility. You want to level your ultimate whenever it's available, which is level 6, 11, and 16. As for upgrades, you want to follow the same order. E for the greater damage, Q for the movement speed and extra shield, and W for the slow it provides towards your Q and E usage. Your ultimate will be leveled automatically, so it's pretty much once you upgrade W. At level 1, it's actually best to level Q in almost all instances. It deals more single target damage than E in lane, as well as absorbs some damage with its shield, and it has a shorter cooldown and low mana cost. For invades, it provides the same power, however, if you can land an E on 3 or more targets, E is essentially better at level 1. At level 3, when you have a point in Q and E, you can put another point in E, especially if you don't intend on using W. You can then level W at level 4. There are around 3 optimal runes taken between the best pro and solo queue players, with a few less optimal but viable runes. A popular choice in high elo Viktor players is First Strike. Anytime you strike first, you will gain extra gold and deal bonus damage within 3 seconds. This complements Viktor's poke and trade playstyle, helping you deal more damage in those burst trades and even get rewarded with some extra gold. This scales very well into late game. However, if you're against heavy poke champs who will usually hit you first, like Xerath or Vel'Koz, then this rune loses plenty of its potential. Another popular choice is Summon Aery. When you want to go for constant trades and harass, even if it's just auto attacks, you will benefit from the extra damage from Aery. This will do more damage than first strike if you're able to harass every time Aery returns to you. This can also be great against champs that poke you first, like Azir, but you can still get in close for hard trades. Phase Rush is more situational and best taken when you need to kite or chase champions. With a burst of movement speed after 3 abilities or auto attacks, Viktor can chase down most enemies, especially when he has his upgraded Q. You'll also have an easier time dodging abilities. And just to clarify your Phase Rush stacks, you get 2 stacks from a Q and then auto attack, only 1 stack from his upgraded E, even if you hit both lasers. W provides 1 stack and you don't even need to stun the enemy, and R will only provide 1 stack even if the enemy is within the electrical field for multiple ticks of damage. Now for 2 less common but viable rune choices, Electrocute is best when you want to fully focus on hard trades and bursting enemies. You'll most likely will take Ignite for added pressure in lane, and you'll have a higher chance to pick up a kill. However, there'll be some team comps where you'll most likely just sit back and E-poke, and therefore Electrocute will be quite useless. All other 3 options have way more useful components. Finally, Arcane Comet is picked by quite a few players for some extra damage. You can reduce the cooldown of Arcane with Q and E easily, helping you proc this Comet a few times in a fight. Best against heavy poke champs that won't let you benefit from any other previously mentioned runes. By the way, you can reduce the cooldown of Arcane Comet with the initial Q and the empowered auto attack. Your upgraded E will reduce the cooldown for each laser hit, and R will reduce the cooldown for each tick of damage it deals. As for minor runes, if you've taken first strike, you want to pick up magical footwear for gold efficiency. Perfect timing might be a better option against those threatening champs like Zed, who have a high chance of bursting you. It's best taken if you're planning on purchasing Zhonya's later on. The second minor rune is Biscuit Delivery for the sustain it provides, although Futures Market and Minion Dematerializer are worth the utility they provide. Minion Dematerializer is best against hard pushing champs. If you're not sure, just stick with Biscuit Delivery. Finally, pick up Cosmic Insight for the Summoner and Spell Haste. If you've picked any of the sorcery runes, Summon Aery, Phase Rush or Arcane Comet, pick up Mana Flow Band for the Mana Sustain. As for the second choice, you'll want Transcendence in most situations for the ability haste, but Absolute Focus and Celerity are just as viable for the extra damage and movement speed respectively. Finally, Scorch for early game pressure, usually if you've taken Summon Aery, or Gathering Storm for the best scaling rune, best taken if you've got Phase Rush or Arcane Comet. If you've gone with Electrocute, Taste of Blood for sustain, Eyeball Collection for some extra AP, then choose between Treasure Hunter for early game snowball, Ultimate Hunter when you want to prioritize having your ultimate up. As for second page options, here are the most common. From Sorcery, Transcendence and Mana Flow Band, best coupled with First Strike. From Inspiration, pick up some utility runes that will best fit your situation. Do you need some extra sustain? You can take Biscuit Delivery. Can you skip boots early and save gold? Get Magical Footwear. Want some extra haste? Get Cosmic Insight. Want to rush an important item like Lost Chapter? Futures Market can save you. Go with Resolve if you're after more defensive runes, taking Bone Plating to resist some bursts, and Overgrowth for extra HP. Shield Bash is great too if you plan to trade with Q often. Now for items. The starting items. Doran's Ring plus 2 health potions, very safe and effective for Spire, providing with HP and mana for early laning. Corrupting Potion, a rare start but still viable. Take it if you plan to hard trade and harass very early on. Components, Dark Seal, a cheap AP power spike with the potential to snowball off takedowns. A Lost Chapter, this is your main first goal during early laning phase. It will ensure you have close to no mana problems once you complete this, and it will build into one of the 3 mythic choices. Stopwatch, a decent early buy if you want to make a play and need some protection against heavy burst threats. Best if you are already planning to buy Zhonya's later on. Mythic choices. Ludens Tempest, the most popular and optimal mythic to purchase. It provides everything you need to burst squishes with the extra splash damage and kite enemies with a bonus movement speed. You can proc this quite a few times during a team fight, making it very effective. Liandries Anguish. When there are 3 or more tanks, you'll want to consider this over Ludens for the percentage HP damage it deals over time. Rod of Ages. This could be viable against poke comps, as you'll get plenty of HP and regen, making you slightly tankier. Make sure your team is covered with enough damage dealers. Crown of the Shattered Queen. A final mythic worth considering if you have heavy threats and you simply need to survive their burst. It's also the best budget option as it's 400 gold cheaper than the first 2 mythic options. Just make sure your team has enough damage already. Legendary items. Shadow Flame. A solid option to increase your damage early with magic penetration, as well as some tankiness with the HP it provides. Lichbane. This synergizes extremely well with Viktor's Q, as you'll need to auto attack enemies anyway. Get this as your second item if you don't need the tankiness from Shadow Flame, and most enemies are quite squishy. Zhonya's Hourglass. One of the best defensive items that counter most burst threats. Check the combo section for some useful tips. Rabadon's Death Cap. The ultimate AP item at 3600 gold. Best as your 5th or final item as it scales off percentage AP, but you can always purchase it earlier if you're snowballing the game. Magi's Soulstealer. The ultimate snowballing item. If you've already picked up a Dark Seal and it's sitting on more than 7 stacks, and you plan on picking up easy kills, pick this item up. Make sure there's a good chance you won't die or you'll lose plenty of gold value. Void Staff. Once enemies have picked up a few MR items, you'll want to rush this item. Morellonomicon. Only if enemies have a heavy healing comp and your support has not bought a Chemtech Purifier already. Banshee's Veil. Against certain abilities that have potential to catch you out with burst or CC, you'll want the safety of this spell shield to block the next ability. It's also a little bit better against AP champions. Cosmic Drive. If you need more movement speed and extra AP during a longer trade and teamfight, it's a viable purchase. Demonic Embrace. 4 or more tanks? Pick up this item along with Liandries Anguish for the extra HP burn damage. Best coupled with HP items so you can get some extra AP. Boots. Sorcerer's Boots. The best boots for the important magic penetration it provides. Ionian Boots. Ability haste is just as important as Viktor relies on spamming abilities to damage and kite enemies during fights. This is your best budget choice if you just need boots quicker. Mercury Treads. Against heavy AP and CC comps, you'll want these. It can help survive burst against some heavy laning threats like Syndra or Annie. Plated Steel Caps. I wouldn't recommend these unless it's an all AD comp. However, you'll lose damage from the first 2 boots and you can always just pick up Zhonya's Hourglass. Shards. As for the first shard, you want to pick up attack speed. This will help with your Q auto attack combos and they'll be much smoother. It will also help proc certain runes like Phaedros and Electrocute slightly faster. For the second shard, you want to take Adaptive for the AP. The final shard should be taken to counter your laner. Armor against AD, MR against AP. If you're unsure of your laner, Armor is the safest as it can at least defend against auto attacks. Summoner Spells. Flash is the first and best option, helping you escape and catch enemies. Ignite. If you need early game pressure or you're up against heavy healing champs like Vladimir or Silas, pick this up. Teleport. One of the safest spells to take, especially against heavy poke and pushing threats. By basing early and teleporting to lane, you can stay even or ahead in CS and levels. After 14 minutes, you can use unleashed teleports to join fight, while you're side laning or split pushing. Ghost. An amazing kiting spell. You can really snowball teamfights with this spell, especially if you get the resets going. Cleanse. Necessary against CC threats like Zoe or Lissandra, or you risk dying from a single combo from them, especially if they follow up with a jungler. Exhaust, perhaps against heavy burst threats like Zed, but you can always purchase a Zhonya's Hourglass to deal with them later on. Barrier, against long-range poke threats like Xerath or Vel'Koz, you might want to take this. However, Teleport is still the safer option with way more utility and options later on. Viktor doesn't rely heavily on combos, so you should always use abilities based on timing and the situation you're in. For example, use Q when you want to absorb damage or need movement speed, use W on a champion after they've used a dash or blink, or perhaps slow them to land other abilities, and generally aim to hit as many enemies as possible with your E and R since they deal plenty of AoE damage. However, there are interactions and tips worth noting that will give you an advantage. Interactions. Q auto attack. Q does not reset Viktor's auto attack animation. So if you want to deal a quick burst of damage, use Q then auto attack. You want to Q and instantly auto attack. His Q range is actually longer than his auto attack, so you need to be within auto attack range to perform this smoothly. E has no cast time. Because E has no cast time and doesn't interrupt your movement, you should always look to start any combos with E first. So EQ, EW, and ER all work. Basic combos. Main trade combo, EQ auto attack. A very quick and smooth combo that procs runes like Electrocute and Phase Rush. E first because it has no cast time, and follow up with Q then auto attack. Be within auto attack range for this to be as smooth as possible. Ultimate combos. A full combo. E, ultimate, Q, auto attack. Again, you want to use E first because it has no cast time and it takes another second for the second part of the shockwave to deal damage. Then use R. Although R has an initial burst, it will deal damage every second, so we need to get it off early in a fight. Finally, follow up with Q and auto attack. You will have movement speed from Q to either stick to your target or back off. This combo is effective even without upgrades. Sometimes you're about to die, so because Viktor has plenty of damage over time with R and E's aftershock, simply press all your buttons before you die, you might still pick up a kill anyway. Flash combos. Flash Q auto. Great to snipe enemies with reliable damage. Finish with ignite for even more kill threat. Perfect for laning phase to gain an advantage early. E flash. This is quite a unique mechanic as you want to E outside the range and then instantly flash to get in range. Not as reliable as a flash Q auto, but it has a longer range to snipe enemies further away. This takes some practice to feel smooth, so try it in practice tool a few times. You can still flash and then E, but it's slightly slower. E flash Q auto. Using the main trade combo and flash, you can aim to finish off enemies with a huge chunk of damage in a quick combo. Practice this until it feels smooth. E flash R Q auto attack. Just use the previous full combo and add flash after E to close distance. You can catch out enemies and burst them further away. Item combos. Zhonya's Hourglass. You can use W, E, and R, and these abilities will cast while you're in the safety of Zhonya's Hourglass stasis. You can actually control your R and change targets during Zhonya's. In clutch situations, this active can buy you time before your abilities come off cooldown. A survival combo. EQ auto attack W Zhonya's. A main trade combo and then Zhonya's. Hopefully your E shockwave hits both and finishes them off. Add ignite before Zhonya's for more kill threat. E R Zhonya's. E, press ultimate then hit Zhonya's. Plenty of damage will be dealt while you're in Zhonya's from E shockwave and 2 to 3 ticks from your ultimate. Again, add ignite before Zhonya's for more kill threat. W mechanics and tips. How you use your W will be the difference between a kill and an enemy getting away. Against mobile champs, you'll have to either wait for them to dash or blink, then use W. You could also use your W first on a mobile enemy, forcing them to use their dash or blink straight away, then it will be easier to land your E and R skill shots. Against immobile enemies, for example in lane, you want to place it behind them as best you can, so they're either forced to walk into you, which should be stronger to fight, or they'll walk backwards and eventually be stunned, or at least burn their flash. This will be your main gank setup. Against fleeing enemies, you'll want to place it as far in front of them as possible, or if they're too far, use the slow the W provides so you can catch up to them. When enemies are chasing you, place it in front of them. They'll be forced to either walk through or path around, helping you get away. Once you have full upgrades, your Q and E will slow enemies, so once enemies are slowed, it's a good time to follow up with W to increase your chance to stun them. E mechanics and tips. As mentioned in abilities, it's a unique ability that feels clunky at the beginning. Apart from practicing a few times in practice tool or bot games, I would recommend using quick cast for efficiency. Simply click E, choose a direction, and then release. Normal cast requires 2 clicks and therefore it won't be as smooth. Practice hitting 2 targets with 1 E, hitting each enemy at the tips. Then practice a few max range E's so you get a good feeling for the range. Then practice a few max range E's. Get a good feel for the range as you'll pick up plenty of kills from low HP enemies running away. Aim to use E in the direction enemies are pathing so they'll take damage from the second part of E. Early game laning phase. Viktor has decent invade potential with Q, but only if your team is strong and ready. E can be better for AoE in rare cases where 3 or more enemies are stacked together. W can be a great way to escape if enemies are invading. Early laning is quite favourable for Viktor in most matchups. You can trade safely with Q, absorbing some damage with the shield. You'll struggle early against champs that can outrange you, like Xerath or Vel'Koz, who are hard to get within auto attack range. Still, you should time your Q to absorb some skill shots. TP is recommended against lanes you'll get poked. Simply recall when you're low and TP back to lane so you can stay even in gold and levels. Against melee champions you can pressure them hard early on. Get in auto attacks whenever you can. You should push waves in if your jungler decides to invade or there's low gank threat, otherwise it's best to keep it frozen either in the middle of the lane or next to your tower. Even if your wave gets pushed and lanes get tough, Viktor can safely farm from range with his E. Save your E especially for cannon minions, as they're worth 5 hex fragments or 2 or more melee minions. Spamming E on a single range minion is usually not worth the mana. Viktor has very few ways of escaping a gank, unless you have a very well placed W. W will also be your tool to set up ganks. Place it behind enemies to either force them towards you or make them use a summoner spell, then have your jungler follow up. Get ready to join any skirmishes with your jungler, especially if they're invading or fighting for Scuttlecrab. However, early game, especially without your upgrades, it's not exactly Viktor's strength, so ping back if your lane is a bigger threat. Roaming isn't exactly Viktor's strength either, especially against mobile champs. However, if the enemy lacks vision through river, or you can surprise their bot lane by coming from behind, aim to hit as many enemies as possible with your abilities. Best to try this only against immobile champs with no flash, or you risk losing farm from mid and falling behind. Viktor relies heavily on upgrades and items to stay strong, so while trying to get assists and kills are great, CS is always the most reliable way to get your hex fragments. Your main priority is just to farm up until you reach your first power spike, your upgraded E, which is 100 hex fragments. Mid game. Viktor has a range of options to play out the mid game. Look to clear mid waves, usually a single E can clear the back wave at this point. Aim to take the mid tower if it's still up. Take objectives and teamfights around important areas like the river, jungle, and epic monster pits. Viktor with 2 to 3 items will do insane burst and consistent damage. These tight areas make it easy to deal AoE damage from E and R. You should look to poke out enemies with E as much as you can. A few pokes will leave most enemies chunked, and you'll instantly give your team a head start if any fight starts. Making picks will be a great way to gain an advantage. Aim to camp a brush and solo kill any immobile enemy squishes with a full combo. You can even 1v2 when you're ahead. Grouping is your best bet as you'll usually want at least one champion to frontline or peel, so you can effectively output damage, although you can peel yourself in most cases with Q movement speed and W slow and stun. If you've fallen behind, side laning is an option, however against some assassins, you'll become an easy target. This option is best if you have TP as you want to join teamfights anytime you can. Try to stay alive after any bad fights or if your team gets caught, so you can at least wave clear, farm up, and prolong the game to reach the later stages. Late game. This is definitely a favourable time for Viktor, as your chances to one-shot enemies is even higher. With all your upgrades and items like Rabadon's Death Cap, any squishy that gets too close will instantly be deleted. However, like most mages, you can have a much harder time one-shotting squishies, especially if they be constantly grouped and they've finished their survivability items. Most of mid-game applies to late game, so look for opportunities to teamfight. Staying grouped is usually the best option, since your AoE damage can win games alone. Fights around Barons and Elder Dragons are great since there's tight narrow areas and brushes to play around. You're still a very squishy mage, so you're vulnerable to assassins. Make sure you have a Zhonya's Hourglass or at least a Banshee's Veil as defensive options. Remember to finish off with Void Stuff if you're going to have any chance of chunking tanks who stack MR. However, if that's not a problem, focus on more AP items. Again, looking for picks is one of your strengths, as one-shotting an enemy can change an entire teamfight and you'll ultimately win you the game. Keep an eye on enemies who have flash or any important abilities on cooldown, as you'll have a great chance to wipe them out early in a fight. Teamfighting. Your main goal as Viktor is to deal AoE damage, which consists of landing your 2 main skill shots, E and R. Landing these abilities on 3 or more targets will win you most teamfights and ultimately the entire game. However, enemies won't always be bunched up, so you'll have to adapt. One of the best strategies, as already mentioned, is to constantly poke with your E, chipping away at enemies' health and leaving them vulnerable for upcoming fights. I cannot stress how important this is when playing Viktor, as it has won me so many games. Look to pop a main squishy target or threat, usually a high damage dealer. Simply using your R on a single target can leave them completely out of a fight, as they are forced to run away for 6 seconds until your ultimate times out. If you're able to position and come from behind, you have a chance to surprise burst the squishy backline. This can be risky, so best use against immobile team comps, or at least you have Zhonya's ready with your team as backup. Zoning is another strategy to focus on. With a well-placed W in a tight corridor, you can keep important enemy champs out of a fight for a few seconds, or even force them to walk around and take longer to start dealing damage. Some enemies will even flash over it, forcing them to waste important spells early in a fight. Kiting is your best bet to hard carry a teamfight, and with the movement speed from Q, you can kite an entire enemy team, especially with the self-peel you have with slows and stuns. If there's an important teammate that's carrying you, then focus on peeling for them, whether it's using skill shots on enemies targeting your teammate, or using W in front of your teammate to offer some safety. Let's quickly go over strengths and weaknesses. I'll cover a few options and solutions that can help you counter some of the weaknesses. Strengths. AoE Burst. With 2 massive AoE abilities and his Q, which can hit up to 2 different enemies, he'll burst any enemies bunched up, making Viktor an amazing teamfighting champion. Wave Clear. His E, when aimed through as many minions as possible, can instantly clear an entire wave. You'll make it hard for any of your enemy laners to roam, and you'll be able to hold off any enemies trying to push in your towers. Kiting and self-peel. With an upgraded Q, the movement speed you gain can help you escape, catch, or dodge. With an AoE W placed in certain areas, it will give you potential to peel most enemy threats, or at least force them to use a dash or flash. Safe laner and first pick. His long range on E makes it safe to farm, and his Q allows him to trade early on with added benefit of soaking up some damage. Scales. No matter how bad your early game has gone, by constantly wave clearing and staying in the game as long as possible, Viktor will eventually become a late game monster. Weaknesses. Squishy. As an AP mage building mostly squishy, you'll be an easy target for any assassins. Items like Zhonya's and others mentioned in the build section should give you specific options for vulnerabilities. Remember to time your Q to soak up damage and the movement speed to dodge and escape. Healing comps. Just like most poke champs, Viktor can struggle against healing comps, which negate any poke damage. Usually healing can be countered with a support anti-healing item, but if they haven't purchased one, be sure to buy a Morellonomicon after your second or third item. Hard engages are recommended anytime you have the chance. No reliable escape. Against mobile enemies, your W has almost no use, so you'll have to keep your distance. Remember, if you feel like you're going to die anyway, just unload all your abilities, since R will still damage enemies while you're dead. Requires Hex Fragments. His power spikes come from upgrading abilities, which require either minions or kill participation. If you have to go for 1v1s early, take it, as you'll gain way more than your enemy laner. If your laner refuses to fight, no problem. Just sit in lane and focus on CS. Outranged. Against long-range poke champs, Viktor struggles to ever get close and become a threat. If you want to get ahead in these lanes, you'll have to stay in brushes and catch them out, which means vision control is important. Another option is to simply wave clear and out-roam them. Pick up Merc Treads if you're really struggling against champs like Xerath and Vel'Koz. Top lane. Even though most of the gameplay in this guide is about mid lane, 99% can be applied to top lane. He's not exactly a strong top laner, but if your team needs some AP, he is definitely viable. Let's go over some tips especially for top lane. For builds, you'll want to use the same runes and items mentioned in builds earlier. You'll have to play aggressive early on against melee champs, slowly poking them down. While they are poked down to about half health, they'll have a much harder time engaging on you, and it decreases the chances of an enemy jungler coming past and diving you. You'll have no real escapes apart from your W, so at a point in W at level 3, it will become your main tool to kite around and keep melee champs away from you. Never hard trade while it's on cooldown. It will even save you from ganks, especially if they try to tower dive. Having one or enemies stunned under their towers will usually lead to you getting a kill or two. Teleport becomes essential for a safe laning phase experience as well as the global pressure later on. You want to take Ignite with Flash or TP for matchups where you'll need to pressure to kill your laner, like Tryndamere, before they snowball out of control. Be ready to join any fights with your jungler, however, be ready to ping back your jungler as you'll really need to upgrade your abilities before you hit your power spike. Apart from being a squishy AP champ in the top lane, there are a few downsides worth considering. Your team may lack a tank as the majority of tanky champs are played top, however, your jungler or support might have this covered. Although he has decent matchups in top where you are able to safely poke and farm, you'll also be severely punished and have a small margin of error in specific matchups, especially those matchups with gap closers. Ultimately, it will come down to how experienced you are with Viktor and top lane matchups, so I would definitely get used to Viktor first in the mid lane before you try him top. If you want full text version of this guide, check out my Mobifier guide. I've put the cheat sheet builds on Instagram if you quickly want all the information on one image. And make sure to follow me on there as I'll be posting real life stuff in the future. I'm still testing out Instagram and seeing how that goes. You'll find other OP builds there too. If you want to ask me any direct questions or simply join a community full of helpful players trying to climb and improve, join my Discord. I want to try to coach as many people, helping you guys reach your rank goals for Season 13. We can go over profiles and even watch replays. I'll find a system that works best. For short videos, I put together some shorts here on YouTube, but I'm going to put some quick guides on TikTok as well. Follow me on Twitter for all other updates as I'm going to be updating that too. Just pick whatever social medias you find most convenient. I'm Zoose and I'll see you in the next video.